A very warm greetings everyone. Welcome back to the lecture series on Introduction to Environmental Economics, Part 60. In this lecture, we are talking about the externalities. We saw the case of open access in the last part and we are discussing the case of fishery. In our case of fishery, we saw that because of open access, we have landed up with the tragedy of commons and we've come to a point that is YOA, as it is displayed on your screens in the graph, that we have come to a point which is YOA. At this point, every extra unit of effort adds more to the cost than it returns to the revenue. That is the problem, that though total revenue is equal to total cost, but every extra unit effort adds more to the cost than to the revenue. It means it is not an efficient point. Y star is the point of efficiency, as you can see, is the efficient amount of output where the marginal cost of fishing exactly equals the marginal revenue. Slopes of two lines are equal. Efficient output Y star occurs at significantly lower output than YOA, where the tragedy of common or fishery has landed up due to open access. This is known as social value. The point DE, the distance between the two graphs, DE is generated and that is called as economic profit. At efficient point, we see, given the case of efficiency, we would have earned the social value of DE amount, which is associated with the fishing, and formally it is also called as rent associated with fishery. That profit or economic rent is dissipated because of open access, because you are no more now at Y star, you are at now YOA. A congested road is congested because the last motorist entering into the road did not take into account the impact of his or her action. Motorist entering did not take into account the amount, his or her slight effect on all the motorists it will have, and it will reduce the speed as well as it will lead to congestion. Same in the case of fishery, and another fisher entering the fishery did not come into account the entire dissipation of social value, that is economic rent, did not consider the cost it will have on other fishers. Therefore, too many motorists use the road during congested periods and dissipate the net value of the road. The gross value of the trip is equal to the cost of trip, including the waiting time. Now, the same case can be generated of open access for the congested road. As I explained, as we saw that the case of fishery, we saw that there is a discrepancy between the efficiency condition and open access tragedy of commons. Same thing can be done for the case of motorists. Now, any externality. Now, we can discuss other cases also. An externality which can lead to a negative externality or a positive externality. An externality occurs when one person's or firm's action affects another entity without permission. Negative externality occurs if one plays music loudly and the other neighbors get affected negatively. Similarly, if there is a laundry is located next to a steel mill, the act of making the steel increases the cost for a laundry, as the pollution or the emission from the steel factory can affect negatively on the laundry mill because of the dirt and the pollution. A fisher enters the open access fishery and makes it more difficult for the existing catch of the fish. One more additional driver in the congested highway generates externality for others. These are all cases of externalities, and mostly they are all negative externalities. But at the same time, one can visualize some positive externalities also. The owner of an apple apiary provides a positive externality to the orchard in terms of bees pollinating the apple blossoms. Generation of knowledge also provides a positive externality in the sense that its benefits are rarely confined to those that generate the knowledge. Knowledge is a common pool and anybody can get positive benefit out of it. Now let us consider framework for externality and see how it functions. Consider an individual utility function which is given by u as a function of x and e, where x and e are the quantities of two goods or bads consumed. Individual chooses how much of x, which is a market good, to consume, but has no control over the consumption of emission E. E is given to the individual. E you can consider it as externality, and how much of E will be consumed is under no control. That is considered as externality. Let us see the consumption externality case by using this utility function. An externality exists when the consumption or production choices of one person or firm enters the utility function or the production function of another entity without that entity's permission or compensation. However, those actions between the two agents that are mutually agreed upon and for which the payments occur, they are not considered as externality. Let us take the case of production possibility case, where the production externality exists between steel and laundry. We are taking a model example for steel and laundry. Maximum amount of the two can be produced together. Steel and laundry together, they can achieve the maximum depending upon their production possibility curve. With no externality, both can produce maximum amount of output, and the two firms are essentially independent of each other. This is the situation given to us. Now, suppose modest externality gets involved. And what is the externality? That steel mill or factory produces emission that affects the laundry. That is a smoke that increase production of steel will diminish the laundry output. So therefore, the laundry's production function gets affected due to steel's production. This is depicted in the next diagram. We can see line 1 and line 2 as well as line 3. It can be seen on the graph that given the case when they both are independently producing, they can produce the maximum output, that is 1. Laundry is located on the vertical axis output and steel production on the horizontal axis, and we see that in case of no pollution and independence, they both can produce maximum output. While when there is a modest amount of emission, or you can say externality, then the dark concave line is there, and then there is a convex line which is dashed line of numbered as 3, the third line. That is a strong externality, while modest externality is number 2, line number 2. The possible output combinations can even be non-convex, leading to potential pricing problem. Generally, we take convexity in order to identify the equilibrium prices. Convexity, the point of tangency is easily located, and that's why we try to, for the efficient conditions and for optimality conditions, we assume convexity. As we move two firms away from each other, the strength of pollution externality is bound to decline. So it means the proximity is a main role, it plays a main role between the two. Production externality exists when one firm's profits are involuntarily affected by another's. Suppose we have a technology of production laundry, producing laundry, and that is given by the equation L equal to F function of x1 to xn and E. x1 to xn are all the inputs used in the laundry, and E is the emission, that is smoke generated by the steel mill. Similarly, we have the production function for the steel mill. Z1 to Zm are the inputs used by the steel, and it's a steel production is a function of all the inputs used. At the same time, E is a function of all the inputs. All the inputs are leading two types of output. So all the inputs Z1 to Zm are leading to two types of output. Output S, that is steel, and at the same time parallelly they are emitting E amount of pollution or emission. So we can see that, note that E is chosen by the steel mill, but E enters into the production function of laundry also. So the laundry has no say over the level of E, the quantity of E that is entered because of the steel production. Smoke is now, that is E is become the externality. A consumption externality is the case where we deal with the utility function instead of the production function. In case of utility function, we use UXE, where X is just a basket of goods and that is chosen for the consumption, and E is the level of pollution that enters the utility function. That is consumption externality. However, the externalities generated by paper mill and discharge of the pollution river that are used for the swimming and all etc. are different cases. We come back to the Pareto relevance of the externality. So what is the point that will be considered as Pareto in case of steel, and we were talking about laundry production and steel production. So where is the point of efficiency that we have to see? Now in this diagram which is there on the screen, you can see S0, L0. There are 2 points located, S0, L0 and S1, L1. S0, L0 is the point which occurs when there is no regulation or no interaction between steel and laundry. So as it is very evident that steel is producing the maximum S0 possible according to the production possibility curve, while the laundry is producing a very lesser amount as S0, L0, because it is the production gets affected by the steel production. So how do we move from S0 to L0, and where do we move from S0 to L0? That is the whole question. Now if laundry, S0, L0, they merge together, steel and laundry merged together, both the firms merged, then we land up with S1, L1. Merging would mean that their production function becomes same. Y1 is the value of output of merged firm and Y0 is the value of output without the coordination. So suppose we assume that their prices PS and PL of price of steel and price of laundry, then one can make the cost functions. Various possible outcomes and combinations of laundry and steel are presented, but the fixed amount of input production possibilities and the maximum of the steel that can be produced in this graph. So with no intervention, the steel mill will ignore the effects of laundry and keep on producing S0. The laundry will produce as much amount as it can, and that is only L0. Assuming the prices which we have already said, PS and PL, the total value of output that can be produced is located on the vertical axis. Now eliminate the externality by merging laundry and steel mill. As you can see on the graph, that the steel production will adjust taking into account the negative effect of smoke, because they both are together. So one will see that each other are impacting each other. So they will try to reduce the negative effect, finding the point at which the total output for together with S1 and L1 are together, they come to a larger output. So they will shift from S0 L0 and they move from S0 L0 to S1 L1. One can see that on vertical axis Y1 is greater than the Y0. If there is a transfer from laundry to the steel mill, which is considered as Pareto improvement. Now this is considered as Pareto improvement. Why? Because though the steel production has reduced, as S1 is lesser than S0, but there is a payment done by the laundry to the steel, and that is why that has been compensated. So both have become better off by S1 L1. However, if no transfer takes place, then there is a potential Pareto improvement over S0 L0. This is because they will see that they get a larger picture, and there is still smoke being generated, produced. So there is still an externality effect, and there is need to be distinguished between Pareto relevance and Pareto irrelevant externality. So the idea is that one needs to distinguish type of externality. If it is Pareto relevant externality, then it is considered good, and there can be a Pareto irrelevant externality. A movement from S0 L0 to S1 L1 is a Pareto relevant movement. It is socially desirable to correct a Pareto relevant externality. After correction, the externality becomes Pareto irrelevant. Basically, the movement from S0 L0 to S1 L1 has become Pareto relevant movement. At S1 L1, we are still generating externality, that is steel. Steel is getting still produced, but emissions also. But this kind of externality is considered Pareto irrelevant. The smoke at S0 L0 is Pareto relevant, whereas smoke at S1 L1 is Pareto irrelevant, because both have become better off. Some amount of smoke generation is acceptable, and it is socially acceptable unless it is hurting or creating a cost to other. Let us consider the case of swordfish. There are examples of externality which are also called as pecuniary externality. What are pecuniary externality? Suppose there is a price of a swordfish that rises dramatically, and that is due to increase in popularity of a fish, which is considered as a delicacy, and suddenly the tradition changes and trend changes in the market, and people start buying more fish, and therefore the prices shoot up. The action of others, the change in taste, general change in taste of others have driven up the prices of fish, so that now you have to pay more of that you consume for the less of swordfish. This is called as pecuniary externality. In other words, prices change due to action of others. Pecuniary externality is mainly because prices change, and they change because of action of others. Your utility changes because your income is fixed basically. So when the prices change, so utility also changes. While there is certainly an external effect It is something that we will not be concerned about. The basic reason is that there is no inefficiency. In case of prices, impact of prices, there is no inefficiency movement. Inefficiency before and after the price change. It is just a movement from one point of contact to the another point on the Pareto frontier only. So it is called as distribution change, not the change in efficiency. You still remain on the contract curve, or you can say the Pareto frontier, but there are distributional consequences because of change in prices. And those change in prices have occurred because of change in the taste of fashion, and that is called as pecuniary externality. It does not have efficiency effect of conventional externality. We saw efficiency and inefficiency in case of examples of externality of production and consumption, but this is the case where we have distributional consequences and not the conventional externality consequences of efficiency, which involves inappropriate physical amount of externality. So this is one of the example of pecuniary externality. Another example one can see quickly is regarding the swimming. So this is case of swimming is a consumption externality case. How let us suppose that it is we will assume that there is a water pollution and that is an undesirable water pollution to the extent that it degrades the swimming experience for an individual. River may totally clean itself naturally within few miles, like because of some paper mill next to the swimming area. Water has a capacity to clean itself, but to a level that it affects your swimming, then that becomes an externality. It will not be an externality if you are not swimming in that area. There is a graph on it, and that is considered as the river pollution on the horizontal axis, and on the vertical axis is maybe some good you consume along with the swimming. Because it's a case of consumption externality, we are talking about the utility curves and utility function. More pollution means swimming experience is degraded. Thus, additional quantities of other goods are needed to keep the utility constant for that. At some point, swimming is just not the fun anymore because the river comes so polluted that swimming ceases. You can see on the graph that where you stop swimming, that's a horizontal line, that after that it does not give you any pleasure. So this is the point of kink in the indifference curve. To the right of this point, increased pollution has no effect on utility. Even if you try to increase pollution, it will not affect your utility. The problem is that these indifference curve is that they are non-convex. This leads to a serious problem with the pricing. If you consider such kind of cases, the utility curves are of these types, the shape given on the graph. They are non-convex. The basic problem is that generator of externality decides how much of externality to produce but does not take into account the effects of externality. So this is what the problem of externalities is: production, consumption, pecuniary externality. And we have seen through this lecture that the concept of open access, the concept of tragedy of commons, which have led to the inefficiency conditions, notion of externality is discussed at length. Then we discussed two types of externality: production externality and consumption externality, taking into account cases of fishery, case of steel and laundry, and we have discussed pecuniary externality also. We have also seen concept of Pareto relevant externality and Pareto irrelevant externality. Hope you enjoyed the lecture. We will soon meet with another topic in the lecture series of Introduction to Environmental Economics. Thank you so much.